Welcome to the June 14th, 2021 meeting of the Sandusky City Commission. Prior to tonight's meeting, we'll have an invocation offered by Commissioner Harris, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
As many of us are aware of the unfortunate events that took place over the weekend, I just ask that we pray for love and peace in the city, and let's fight to live and not live to fight one another. God bless.
Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Briggs, will you call the roll?
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Brady?
Here.
Ms. Twine?
Here.
Mr. Meinzer?
Here.
Mr. Waddington?
Here.
Mr. Poole?
Here.
Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of May the 24th, 2021. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the May 24th meeting and dispense with the formal reading.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Are there any residents in the audience that have questions pertaining to tonight's agenda? Residents, any comments pertaining to tonight's agenda? Please step to the microphone if you just identify yourself and give us an address for our records to be able to communicate to you. We ask for 3-minute limit.
Yes, my name is Matt Ames of 2204 Mill Street. I'd like to ask the City Commission if they had received public comment or any input from the residents concerning the creation of the designated outdoor and refreshment area downtown. Though most of us are supportive of DORA, we do want to provide our feedback and ensure the Commission provides adequate public safety for both residents and visitors alike. We want to ensure that common sense policies are in place and communicated well ahead of rolling this out. During the summer months, we will be seeing more foot traffic, vehicles, scooters, bicycles, segways, golf carts, and motorcycles. What plan is in place for enforcing 121 area acre downtown, and what penalties will be in place if these policies are broken? We would also like the Commission to address whether additional police resources will be allocated during special downtown events, and if that may understaff policing in our neighborhoods during those times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ames. I'm optimistic that your questions will be answered when we deal with that piece of legislation here in a little while. Any additional comments from residents on agenda items? Yes, sir.
Hello, William Schramm, a resident. I'd like to speak later on the Landmark Commission that is split right now.
Can you just give us your address if you would?
I'm sorry.
Do you have an address?
914 West Washington, Sandusky, Ohio.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Briggs, are there any comments that you received via email regarding tonight's agenda from residents?
President Brady, I have several. I do have one in relation to the landmark appeal, which I can hold, for the appropriate time if that's also what you would like. Beginning with Thomas Lamarca at 206 48th Street in Sandusky. He said, "I'm concerned about the hazardous situation created by the mailboxes and bike path along Dennis Road. Probably 2,000 plus cars travel that road daily versus 4 to 5 bikes and golf carts a week. You should have also included a turn lane onto Thorpe. What were you thinking and what are your plans to fix it?" And I apologize, as I'm reading that, I think that is better for the end of the meeting. Tim Schwanger of 362 Sheffield Way wrote in and said, "Please explain why the DORA is being passed under emergency legislation. When the city tried to pass the downtown SID, the legislation was passed as non-emergency." Ms. Sharon Johnson of 1139 5th Street in Sandusky said, "What obligation is the city under in both the DORA and Jackson Street Pier contracts? Is there any way out-of-pocket expenses on both or any in-house and in-kind services are being performed by the city? Why is DORA being passed on emergency legislation? This is the first time people are seeing the contract. so it is not fair to have legislation done on emergency. Ryan Whaley of 316 East Water Street said, in Sandusky, said, I support DORA for a few reasons. One, I've lived and visited locations with DORA or similar programs. These towns and cities show an increase in foot traffic for both locals and out-of-town visitors. Number two, Sandusky has a burgeoning transit restaurant and pub scene. Retail locations, however, are still lacking. DORA will allow retail patrons to grab a to-go drink from a bar or restaurant and take them into shopping locations to browse and spend money. This move will stimulate our shopping and retail downtown and encourage growth. Number three, as a bar and entertainment venue owner, I have had guests ask me firsthand if we have DORA because they've experienced it in other cities and had a favorable experience. Four, DORA will help increase event attendance as guests can bring a drink while supporting local business. And five, we have a beautiful walkable waterfront. Enjoy it with your favorite beverage. Lastly, Nikki Lloyd of 247 East Market Street in Sandusky wrote, I'm sending this email in support of the DORA program for tonight's City Commission meeting. I would like to thank city staff for working with our local business owners to bring this to commission. I have talked to many of the downtown business owners that are in support of an outdoor refreshment area. As a property owner and entrepreneur of multiple downtown businesses, I welcome an outdoor refreshment area. I'm sure some will say it will create more garbage, but with mindfully set trash cans, the benefits outweigh any possible negatives. We look forward to increased foot traffic it will bring to our downtown entertainment district. It is truly a win-win, supporting our bars and restaurants, possibly creating more jobs downtown, which means more tax revenue for the city. And this will be a great addition to make downtown Sandusky even more attractive to our community and our tourists.
Thank you, Ms. Briggs. I think there might be one additional comment from Mr. Lou Schultz. Do you have that, Ms. Briggs?
I have that. It is in relation to the landmark.
Okay.
If you would like me to read it now or later.
I considered the landmark hearing as an agenda item, so why don't you read that into the record now?
Okay. Lou Schultz, 125 Sunset Drive in Sandusky wrote, as you know, the Landmarks Commission has rejected the plan submitted by MAC Builders because of their plan to add a deck to the roof accessible by elevator or a stairwell. While I applaud the ongoing efforts of the Landmark Commission to preserve our city's historic streetscape, I disagree with their decision to reject the plans for the Heminger Saloon for three reasons. First, MAC Builders is committed to restoring and preserving the facade of the building, which is of paramount importance. Second, we hope to preserve historic structures. They must be economically viable. Without the deck, this may not be the case with the Heminger Saloon. Third, many other historic buildings along Water Street already feature rooftop decks. Why should MAC Builders be denied the option to add a deck when others have received permission to do so? I don't take the request that the Landmark Commission decision be overturned lightly, but in this case, I think it is warranted.
Thank you, Ms. Briggs. Those questions hopefully will be answered as the hearing progresses and as the legislation appears before us. Tonight we have on the agenda an appeal by MAC Building and Development of a decision by our Landmark Commission pertaining to the appropriateness of a rooftop structure they proposed for a building at 333 West Market Street in Sandusky. I've asked our law director to provide this commission with some guidance on how this hearing will be conducted, more in an effort that the seven of us can give a fair hearing to this appeal and somewhat stay in our lanes regarding what our charge is. So, Mr. Heil, if you'll share with us what our charge is.
Sure. Thank you, Commission President Brady. As you mentioned, before the commission, we have an appeal from the Sandusky Landmark Commission's decision denying a certificate of appropriateness for a rooftop structure at 333 West Market Street. I'm just going to briefly go over kind of generally the procedure because we don't do a lot of these appeals very often. I think it's actually been about 2 years. So the issue before you today is simply the approval or denial of the certificate of appropriateness for that rooftop structure. In short, the relevant issue is basically whether the structure itself should be constructed in a historic district under our landmark preservation guidelines. In your packet and in the agenda, you'll find the written findings from the Landmark Commission. There's a communication from staff kind of describing what the appeal is. There's supporting documentation, I believe from the appellants, including their application and other supporting documentation. I believe also we sent around the link to the Landmark Commission's meeting, and there was a transcript of that where Landmark made its decision to give the appropriate context. And those are the written findings that you'll be basing your decision on tonight. Additionally, after I'm done, I can swear in all of the witnesses, anyone who will be actually be providing testimony. But I believe you'll be hearing from the appellant and any witnesses that they brought with them. Staff, I think, is on virtually and available for questions. And if you want to take any additional comments from the public, you may do so. This is an appeal. It is a hearing format, and the witnesses are going to be sworn in so that you can actually directly ask them questions, and they will give evidence on which you will base your ultimate decision. At the close of that, which will be when you decide, there's I would recommend entertaining a motion either granting the appeal or denying the appeal. And then it's a simple majority vote on that. I'm here, so if you have any questions, but with that, if you'd like, I can swear in the witnesses for the
I think that's appropriate now. Anyone wishing to give evidence in this appeal, we'll let Mr. Heil swear you in.
I'd ask anyone who's going to give testimony in the appeal if they'd raise their right hand and repeat after me. Do you promise to swear or tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Horstman, I noticed that you had your hand up, so I'm going to consider you sworn in also. Mr. Horstman, will you provide us with some background on why we're here today and what this appeal is about?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. This is an appeal of 333 West Washington. The applicant submitted an application that contained many different comprehensive exterior renovations, including changes to the facade, the storefront, windows, in addition to the rooftop deck and the rooftop structure. The Landmark Commission elected to view the application in two parts, one for everything from the roof down and one on the rooftop structure and the rooftop deck. This building is both within our downtown historic district, and it's also listed on the National Register of Historic Places individually. So in a sense, there are two reasons for why it needs to go before the Landmark Commission for any approvals. The Landmark Commission did approve all of the exterior renovations that were proposed, with the exception of the rooftop deck structure and the rooftop deck itself. So those are the two pieces that have been appealed and sent to Commission today. Staff did indicate past precedent of adding rooftop structures. We don't have anything specific in our Sandusky preservation design guidelines that speak to these types of structures. However, they have been typically approved in the past, which was noted in the report. I do have the full presentation available to share virtually for the applicants presented to the Landmark Commission that may aid in their presentation tonight. And then that's all I have from staff for the moment, but happy to answer any questions as we go.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Horstman?
Mr. Chairman, not at this time.
Pardon me?
Not at this time.
Mr. Horstman, I have one question for you, and I believe I read this in the documents that you shared with us. Can you share with us what staff's recommendation on this process is?
Yeah, we recommended approval of the certificate of appropriateness. Generally, we said the Landmark Commission meeting staff had no objection to the revised plans that were submitted as part of the May application. And in the communication to Commission did indicate a request for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Horstman. If the appellant would like to make their presentation, now's the time.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a question of the law director,
Sure.
while it's making its way to the podium. Mr. Heil, could you clarify for us that we are able to base our decision based upon what is testified, the testimony that's taken in tonight, as well as anything else that is in the record in terms of what staff provided us and the hearing transcript itself?
That's correct. Everything you listed, Commissioner, is correct. It's the transcript, the actual decision that was made at the meeting, and then the application, any supporting documents that have been entered into evidence in the agenda, and then anything that any of the witnesses present here today.
Thank you.
Mr. Whalen.
All right, forgive me if I stumble here a bit. I'm a little nervous. This is pretty important to us. Good evening, and thank you for hearing our appeal today. As citizens who are putting a tremendous amount of our personal energy and making family sacrifices towards a project that we believe will beautify our city and restore the property at 333 West Market Street, it was disheartening to be denied the right to restore our property in a way we feel consistent with those around us at the landmark meeting. I've come to understand Mr. Meinzer's point at that meeting from May 19th in voting no as a landmark member, but being in favor of putting the responsibility on the elected people of the City Commission. The landmark is appointed to advise City Commission and not make difficult decisions for them. I personally am a bit baffled at how our particular project is a difficult decision, but the Landmark Commission Chair and one other member seem to think it was. The only other member who voted against was Mr. Meinzer, who I believe is in favor of our project, but was not in favor of putting the tough decision on the Landmark Commission, but rather on the elected city commissioners. I do want to point out that 4 landmark members, including Mr. Meinzer, expressed support of approving our project at that meeting on May 19th, and the decision of which we're appealing now. Particularly that Mr. Whaley and Mr. Griffiths made excellent points about why they voted yes. Mr. Griffith especially emphasized that the doghouse over top of the elevator was a pre-existing structure, as was the atrium rooftop access that was there. Essentially what we've done, as you'll see, I'm going to go through the presentation kind of quickly here after I speak. You'll see that we kind of put those together under one roof to help solidify that corner of the building, which was a water hazard and leading to deterioration of the building, and also is going to allow for eventual rooftop access for ADA elevator to the rooftop. We're here before you today asking for the freedom to continue to be transparent and responsible neighbors in our rehabilitation of 333 West Market, a property we are proud and happy to enjoy. Our plan is to return the building to its original use while enjoying its proximity to the Great Lake that is the reason so many of us live here. Our plan, including the rooftop structure, does fall within the city's updated master plan to celebrate rooftops and is well within the scope of what the Landmark Commission has approved. Our plan has absolutely zero loss of historic character, and in fact enhances the historic character of the building and is going to beautify the block it sits on. As owners of the property, it is up to us to construct and execute a plan to make this happen in a time frame and budget that is cost effective. We are asking you to allow us to do this. The approval of the rooftop structure is important for us to be able to move forward with the next steps of our project, which is to watertight the roof, particularly this area, and to construct the stairwell, which is underneath this area. The approval of this plan is also important to the economic viability of the project. While we're not here today to prove our worthiness as developers, I would like to point out that we have a portfolio of local projects we're proud of, and that I have purposely made the decision to invest most of my available capital outside of my teacher retirement into improving properties around Sandusky. This is just the latest. And Mac Building is committed to doing our part to improve Sandusky. I'd like to quickly review the presentation from May 19th that ended in a 3-3 tie that's being appealed here today. 3 main things that I want the commission to see. Number 1, Mr. Horstman, if you are emceeing up there, if you could show the views from the rooftop. Particularly this one, right? So this is the reason we want to enjoy this space. This is the reason why people are going to want to come to our property here to enjoy this space, because of that view. That's why the City Commission approved the master plan involving enjoying rooftop views. In fact, Tony and I, as we came down from this roof when we viewed this property back in May of 2019, that's what made up our mind. Number 2, I want to make sure that everybody has seen our design for the rooftop. Mr. Horstman, I think the one that shows kind of the front angle, that is probably the best view. I'd be happy to later go through any of these and all of this with you. My hope is that you guys were able to see this and review it in the packet and hopefully even watch the video of the landmark meeting. Mr. Fike is also here to be able to answer any questions if you guys have them about the design itself. Third thing I want to make sure that was seen from the presentation was to make note, Tom, if you would maybe a little slower go through the pictures there of all of the rooftop structures that have been approved and are built in this town, including the one that was approved at the March 17th meeting. I think it's 125 East Water Street, that's it there. That's, you can see the one, you can actually see it from the street. The new one is actually much higher. And if you look at the difference in elevation from the side of the building to the top of the building, that is greater than on our design. I'm in favor of all of these. I think that rooftop additions are great, and I think that we want a rooftop town here in Sandusky, which is what we saw in the master plan. I was recently in Asheville, North Carolina, and rooftop tours was part of their things to do list. I didn't get to do it, but it would be worth doing, and I think people would enjoy that even more here on the waterfront. Again, what we're doing fits well within the scope of what has been approved by the Landmark Commission and what we see around us in the historic district. We meet the standards as much, if not more, than most of these projects, and nothing of historic value is being lost in our project. Again, nothing of historic value is being lost in our project. In fact, we are reverting things from 40 state to a more historic condition. And we went along essentially with anything that could have been conceded to the Landmark Commission in going with wooden windows and a new wooden facade. Everything is being preserved. We just want to add the rooftop as well. Thanks again for hearing our appeal. We can review any details you guys have questions about, and Mr. Fike is here to answer questions as well.
Commissioners, questions for Mr. Whalen or for Mr. Fike?
And again, I'm new to this, so I don't know what
We're just asking for questions from the commissioners right now. You'll have an opportunity to cover.
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Poole.
For this roof, since the rooftop is the only thing that's in question, before you built this, did the city grant you permission and permits to do this?
I'm sorry, can you repeat one more time, Mr. Fike?
I said, did you have permits and permission to build or an approval of some sort before you build it?
Mr. Poole, that question is not germane to this appeal or to this hearing. The question of whether the applicant has obtained permits has nothing to do with this hearing.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Will you explain that? Why not?
Yeah, under what law are we talking about now?
This hearing is based on the evidence presented by the applicant. Any additional questions?
And the questions that I asked him, what are you talking about?
I'm not going to allow that question.
So this is a meeting for nothing.
Mr. Hio, is this correct?
I mean, it's the chair's decision to
Okay.
run the appeal, first and foremost. And secondly, as I said earlier, the relevant issue before the commission is whether or not to affirm or overturn the decision of the Landmark Commission on whether or not the rooftop structure fits within a historic district or on a historic building.
Okay, fine. Then that's fine. I get it. I understand. I'll wait for the next
Thank you.
folks. Thank you.
Sure.
Additional comments or questions for Mr. Fike or Mr. Whale? Comments regarding introducing any evidence into the hearing? Yes, sir.
Well, not necessarily evidence, but what I'm seeing here is, unfortunately, from my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, first of all, I want to say thank you. I mean, this is not about spoiling your dream or, we want things here in Sandusky. We want to build. I moved here in 1996 from Bay Village. I saw Sandusky 20 years ago being basically nothing. Now I see it growing and developing. So I'm kind of caught in that middle. I'm not the old stodge, that's been here for 30, 40 years. I'm not the young, 21-year-old. But what concerns me here is precedent. And I just have to go through, which I won't do. We've had many, many lawsuits over splitting hairs over legalities that we spend millions of dollars on. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, you bought the building, you had a dream. We want that dream to be a reality. We don't want it to turn into a nightmare. But why would somebody, even with a track record, build something on the top of a building, spend that money? I just put a fence up at 914 West Washington. I had to go get a permit. I had to check with the city, and why would you even do that? And probably, let me back up there. Shame on me for saying that. I think your enthusiasm made you do that. And you didn't go through the channels that you need to do in the city to do that. When you organized back in, I think I'm not even going to read this long thing here, it's about 3 minutes long. 2015, when you organized the Planning Commission, you designated people that were educated to help preserve landmark properties downtown. In doing so, that also fell to a federal and state requisition of what needs to be done and what can't be done with landmark properties. And that's the only reason that you have a split vote of 3-3 of the Landmark Commission. It's not about you not being able to do your project. Believe me, it's not about that at all. But you jumped the gun, you got a structure up there now, which actually that shows it at the back of the building. It's really at the front of the building. That's not a true picture of what it is. And when we do that, then we fall into all the other lawsuits down the road, from, our police commissioner and everybody else that's been in Sandusky that sues us because we want to anxiously build up Sandusky. But we fail to slow down and be like, you know what? Whether I like it or not, I had to get a permit to build a fence. Whether you like it or not, and you're a businessman, shame on you for building before you got a permit to do that. Now you're stuck. For a point, you may have it passed tonight, and that's fine. I'm for your project. But what I want to see the city do as a citizen, and again, I'm not against this project. We're now talking about building a hotel and everything else downtown and all these other things. We're rushing to try and change, which is great. But should I go through and remind you of all the lawsuits we had? Of all the millions of dollars that we've spent by rushing things through? We're only asking this gentleman here to pause. We love your project. We embrace your project. But let's get our P's and Q's in order. And if you're not having and trusting the Planning Commission, the Landmark Commission to make those decisions, then why have the Landmark Commission? Because it doesn't entertain following federal guidelines, which have, and I'm not fully knowledgeable about it, but it has something to do with a structure that can be seen from the street level on 4 or 5 different sides. And actually that's a disadvantage. If you don't follow those guidelines, you miss out on a lot of free money that you can have. So we're not fighting you. We're just saying if you follow the rules, you can probably have more money than the city could ever give you to develop that project. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Additional comments on the hearing?
Ed Stout, 1222 Marlborough Street. On the landmark decision, I'm here representing the Old House Guild of Sandusky, an organization dedicated to the preservation of historic structures, and also a site manager of the Cook Darn House, a state-owned building on the National Registry of Historic Buildings. With invested interest in both, I'm aware of the rules and regulations that govern what can and cannot be done with the building on the National Registry. As a precursor, I would mention that it was the Old House Guild, along with the Sandusky Library, who over 40 years ago spent many thousands of hours, free volunteer hours, and a lot of great effort to get a thorough categorizing of the historic structures in Sandusky and get a majority of them on the National Registry, making Sandusky the city with the most buildings on the National Registry in the state of Ohio. It was with the Guild's help that the city obtained its historic district downtown, and it was not long ago expanding that district was on the ballot and passed by voters. The request for current alterations at 333 West Market Street to remain and progress in a very much violation of the National Registry's guidelines, we oppose. And if allowed to receive approval, would represent the most flagrant example of violation to those guidelines in the heart of that district. Why authorizations and permits were not properly issued by some city officials is in some ways suspect and shows personal interest or involvement that never should have occurred.
Mr. Straka, again, you're talking about something that has nothing to do with this appeal. The permitting process, a totally separate issue.
Yeah.
At some point, that can be brought up at this table under new business or under old business by a commissioner. But to dwell on permits is not germane to the decision we have to make.
But the final comment, ultimately giving approval would place in jeopardy the continued existence of Sandusky's historic designated district, along with any future grant monies, tax abatements, and the like from state or national governments if they pull our availability to them because of such willful disregard for the guidelines affecting these structures in a city with so many registered structures. Is this what the city really wants, to possibly lose our historic district or availability to grant money and tax abatements from the state or local state or national government? I ask you, the commissioners, whose judgment ultimately can decide what is the outcome, to do the proper thing and deny this request.
Thank you. Additional comments regarding the hearing? Mr. Fite?
Just two quick comments.
We all know who you are,
Yep.
for the record.
Sometimes I don't. John Fike, 629 Columbus Avenue. I'm the architect for the project. Two things. Number one, a building permit was applied for due to missteps on both sides.
Mr. Fike,
I understand.
like I've stopped the
Just
last
want to clear the
two questions
record
up
that a permit was applied for.
Okay.
The big point I want to make is one of the things that Landmark Commission is empowered with is the guidelines from the National Park Service. They are guidelines. They are not absolutes. One thing that's nice about having a public policy group like the Landmark Commission and then the City Commission is that you're allowed to put your own thoughts into what is there. They are not absolute. We feel this is something that is in the best interest of the city. That's why it was brought to the Landmark Commission, and I think that's why we agree with Mr. Meester when there are problems with this, that there's a split decision that probably the Alderman needs to come here and get a final decision. And that's all we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fike. Additional comments? Mr. Heil, I wonder if you are prepared to share with us our two options.
Sure.
I still have a question for, I'm not,
Oh.
okay, I didn't know if you have it waiting for
Certainly.
witnesses. Yeah. For Mr. Horstman. Mr. Horstman still there?
Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, would you bring up the pictures that were presented at the Landmark Committee meeting by Mr. Berkey, the ones he took from the street? And then after that, if you would explain why what was said there in terms of why they think this why they did not approve this. Cite the rule and what he said. If you wish, you can just put the meeting up on YouTube and show it at that section. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, give me a moment, I'll try to attempt to locate that.
Just to have context of what we're actually talking about.
This must be what is called dead air.
A little bit.
You commissioners could come.
Maybe Ms. Twine. The rest of us couldn't carry a tune as far as the door.
So true.
Mr. Chairman.
Speak for yourself.
Hey, Mr. Miser, had a question.
I did. I could testify while you search for it. I did swear. I'd like to
You did.
speak.
I saw you raise your hand.
I did, I swear.
Do you have a comment, Mr.
Well, I would
Miser?
like to
And we'll
tell-
come
yeah.
back to
Yeah,
Mr.
please
Poole's
go
question
back.
while we're finding your,
Please go to the podium.
Commissioner Miser.
I just had a short statement, but, all of us commissioners do get, there's preference, or there's somebody got a sweet deal, or somebody got this. So that is something that we're always struggling with, and a lot of us, take it to
All
heart.
us commissioner, clarify that statement, please.
You what?
All us commissioners get sweet deals with.
No,
Being
that we
accused
hear
of-
the comment that there
Oh,
are,
okay.
I'm sorry, that there are sweet deals out there, there's preference or something, that's what I'm saying. Like, I do anyway, I get calls, so, and somebody got a sweet deal downtown with this business or this grant or whatever, so. And there's one comment, and it was brought up, I didn't plan to speak to, but it was Shores and Island building, Mr. Castor's building. I think that's probably the worst example is to use as an example, because that was brought up once before I was on Landmark, but it was, the architect should have known it needed two means of egress. They came back a year later and asked for another means of egress all the way into the development of this building, and it was like, where the heck are you going to put it? So that's why that's on the front of the building. There is, the Landmark has, if they would have input, you could have setbacks, you could have different roof slants. There's a lot of things that you could do to appease the Landmark Commission as far as aesthetics. So I just want to put that out there. It's not that building got some better treatment than the other one. That's, I'm just saying how that came about. And, the Landmark Commission has a duty of preserving historical buildings. And as a liaison and Landmark Commission, I can tell you the committee has a group of really dedicated and passionate people. And you can see tonight you got the Old House Guild and the Historical Society, and they take it really seriously. So I felt like it didn't belong in their laps to make this difficult decision. It should be here. And it should be heard out and vetted out at this table with everybody saying what has to be said so nobody thinks there's a sweet deal going on. I think the bottom line is the Landmark Commission, the administration, the city commission, all the longtime residents, even the tourists recognize the importance of saving buildings and of historic significance. Most of the aesthetics and the culture of the building are being preserved. Mr. Whalen talks about sandstone windowsills and tuck pointing the building, and the facade's going to be all brought back to the old character, what hasn't been in a year. So I think it's a 99% win. The city administration desires to promote downtown development, and this was in their plans. There are a lot of rooftop structures and bars, and it's part of our character and our culture. Does the rooftop structure miss the mark as far as aesthetics? Yes, I believe it does. Do I think improvements aesthetically could have been realized if we had presented to the Landmark Commission first? Yes, I think they would have made a compromise, and they could have helped develop an elevation drawing that would have been more appealing to the community and to the people in this building. But with that said, the project's being built by private owners, not with public tax dollars, and it's already underway. So at this point, I think it's imperative that the building division, the fire prevention division address what we have left as life safety issues. What is the intended use group of this? Is it going to be for assembly, bar? Is it going to be used for Airbnb or residential? What is the weight of the rooftop, top deck, and the structure, or what we would call the dead load? What are the live loads, or the deck in accordance with its intended use group? Can the structure handle environmental loads such as wind and snow? I'm going to vote yes tonight, but from here on out, we need to follow the processes put in place from Landmark and planning, or we have to change the process, because this is what happens in the end run if we don't. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Commissioner Miser. Mr. Horstman, how are you doing?
Yes, Mr. President, I believe I have the pictures that Commissioner Poole presented. Can you see those okay?
Yes, and if you would you give the comments that were made by Mr. Berkey at the time to describe this? And the violations, essentially the violations that they suggest that building is not in compliance with? He read two specific things in detail that explain why they denied this. That just needs to be in the record.
Through you, Mr. President, Commissioner Poole, if I can find the exact place in the that was provided, that will specify the exact pieces. Generally, to give a general summation, the certain members of the Landmark Commission believed that one, the notion of it being on a pitched roof was an inappropriate addition that, in their estimation, distinguished it from other types of buildings in which these have been on, and as well as to go back to the Secretary of the Interior federal guidelines. Those are generally discouraged on buildings for with 3 or fewer stories, and that was noted in staff's report. Granted, we also did recognize that those are guidelines and exceptions have been made to that in the past. So I believe those were the two primary reservations from the Landmark Commission.
If I may, Commission President, on the record, may I?
Yes.
Just to answer your question about on the record, the
Yes.
transcript of the meeting and the meeting itself are actually already
Yes.
in the official record. I know you were asking for
Thank you.
auditorily here, but it will be part of the record as well for the actual
Thank you.
appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Howe.
Essentially, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to provide some context to this between the two. We're making a decision that has two sides to the story, and we've been presented one. Essentially, the guidelines indicate that you probably should not put rooftop things on buildings that are 3 stories. That's a general guideline. We have done that here in other locations. And what came out at that meeting was the difference is that in the other locations, it does not leave. And would you back up one picture? The one we had before? There you go. The difference is the regulation standard says that you're not to significantly or substantially alter the look of the building. And I don't have it all in front of me. I wish that you had presented it as it was at the meeting. And this, in comparison to the other buildings that have been approved, and again, I hate speaking for them, so I'll do the best that I can. Those buildings are not surrounded by shorter buildings on either side of them that makes it stand out the way this one does. Additionally, those buildings, for the most part, were on flat roofs. So I don't have a problem if the commission decides, and I've listened to what Mr. Meinzer is leading to. I'm prepared to accept this if you want to make the change today. Okay, there's no question that on the face of the record that there's no reason to appeal this. There's no reason to accept this appeal. As Mr. Meinzer said, he voted no because he realized it's in violation. The 3 individuals who voted yes to allow it before that were on the Landmark Commission, they stated why they did it, and they did it in the face of the reality that this is in violation, but, and I think one of the things said is we're desperate for development. That came out in someone's comment. And you can watch the video to see where it was. Additionally, it's mostly dealing with trying to energize and make sure this becomes a bar. There's really no guarantee that putting a rooftop facility up there means this is going to be a guaranteed business to work. It does not. It does mean after we put it up there that this building, that in addition to being on the national record as the other buildings are not, this is a contributing building, the others are not, so it's not apples to apples. Now, if this commission would like to say we've decided that landmarking, the landmark legislation, we're prepared to relax what we're going to do and not, because Landmark Commission has stopped other financial entities from doing things. Something simple as putting up a sign that they just didn't work. So if you want to change that so that everybody gets treated the same, let's have conversation from the table that says we're going to abandon this quaint landmarking business for downtown and move on. But also, at the meeting, the members of the Landmark Commission, the one, the chairman, and another indicated, there's really no purpose in us coming here. I think it was Mr. Nagel indicated, I could be out on my boat if you're not going to uphold, if I'm mistaken, please correct me,
No, that's what he
if
said.
you're not going to uphold the legislation. So, happy to vote yes to appeal, but this commission needs to say, okay, we think this is more important than Landmark. So that's where I'm at.
Additional
And
comments?
as you can see, that's not like the rest of the buildings that have things on it. It's just not.
Additional comments? Sir, you had one bite at the apple. Do you have something to add?
I got a real quick point to add, and I'm going to capitalize on you and capitalize on the gentleman that just finished speaking. I think the issue here tonight is not the development. The issue here tonight is not what he's doing. The issue here tonight is not that he didn't get permits to do what he did already through the city. The issue is what was pointed out here and pointed out here. And this is where we get into the lawsuits I talk about. We get in this gray area. We want to move and embrace, and we embrace you. Believe me, we embrace you, buddy, all right? But you have some missteps. You have some issues moving forward about how we can trust you to finish the project so it doesn't become a nightmare. So he made a great point. And I'm also a board director on the Old House Guild. I would embrace this, but my concern is we're in this gray area where, as he said, let's make a law or an issue tonight that we change what is on the record now, because you got Jim's Pizza Box coming here. They bought the Fedderson's building and is going to be putting a rooftop pizza place up there. And this is where we get into those lawsuits down the road because we rush things through. So that's the only reason I'm here tonight. I'm not here to oppose anything. I am here to oppose what is on the record now. We have to follow the rules and regulations, and he should do the same. But if we just go by and say, we like him, we want him to do it, we want Sandusky to grow, which is what his comment was, we get into the legalities of then the next guy, Mr. Pizza Box, Mr. Whoever, comes down and says, well, hey, you guys did this to him, I'm going to sue you now. And that's all I want to say. Let's get out of this sue atmosphere, let's protect ourselves, let's embrace and promote him or whoever else. But we just can't keep rushing things through on these, an emergency, whatever, this or that. And again, you're spending my tax dollars, and I'm getting tired of it. That's all. But kudos to you for your comments, and kudos to you for your comments. So.
Thank you, sir. The concept of passing legislation in the middle of an appeal, I think, is probably not going to happen, or it's probably inappropriate. We find ourselves in the middle of an appeal tonight, and we're going to make that appeal based on the evidence that's in the record and that we've heard here tonight. That is a conversation. At the will of this commission be that they revisit the charge of the Landmark Commission. I think that that's a conversation for another meeting. And I would encourage that, and I think that we owe that to the Landmark Commission to provide them with some guidance as to the direction this commission wants to go with that in the future. But at this point in time, we are in the middle of an appeal. The people making the appeal have been denied by the Landmark Commission. Evidence has been heard. Any additional comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Toy.
there were some great comments made tonight. I do have somewhat of a better understanding of each side. I know that Mr. Whalen has been a developer and loves this community and is trying to do the right things to bring more people to the area to enjoy what we have here. Commissioner Poole and I sometimes don't always agree on things, but I think Commissioner Poole made some great points tonight in reference to the Landmark Commission and what it should be doing, as well as this appeal coming to this table, the city commissioners. I would like more time. I know we have to vote on this tonight, but as mentioned by a few, I do believe we need to allow the people that are on the Landmark Commission. I am relying on them to a certain extent to do what they've been asked to do as being part of that commission. And as was explained tonight, is that their job is to understand the historical aspect of what something does to a building. And if a building, an area, whatever, has this historical assignment to it, and then there's something that we want to do to change it, I think it's difficult for us to make adjustments and changes to things that we identify as historical when some of those adjustments and changes are so obvious that, back in the late 1880s, there probably would not have been that type of a structure on top of that type of a building. And again, it's not to say that that isn't something that we should be doing now, but I'm having a hard time agreeing to the appeal. I support what the Landmark Commission decided. To a certain extent, I don't like the idea, but it's a matter of the votes. It's coming to this table, and we're going to have to make a decision. And so I am going to agree with the Landmark's decision in what they did. And I think that there are some steps that we can take to maybe not end Mr. Whalen's desire to do this, but I think that we need to follow those steps appropriately and don't miss the mark on what we've been asking the Landmark Commission to do.
Additional comments, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, would this be an appropriate time to make a motion to address the outcome?
I believe that it is.
So I move that the City Commission grant the Mac Building and Development LLC's appeal to the Landmark Commission's decision denying the certificate of appropriateness for the rooftop structure. In other words, said in plain English, because this is written by another lawyer, so we got the language right, that we approve the rooftop structure and the certificate of appropriateness.
Second.
Got a motion and a second.
Hang on a
Ms.
second.
Briggs, will you call roll on the...
Wait. Hang on a second. I need to understand it again. You move the commission.
Mr. Howell, will you explain to Commissioner Poole what his vote means?
Sure.
Okay, we're approving his appeal, correct?
Correct. The motion is
Okay, that's
on the
right.
appeal. So
I need to
a
read it twice.
yes vote would be to grant the appeal and approve the rooftop structure. A no vote would be the opposite.
Okay, fine. You can't skip discussion, that's all.
There is no discussion. We've had the discussion.
There's no discussion on this
Okay.
motion. We just had it.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Briggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Ms. Briggs, you've missed Commissioner Poole.
Well, you can't manipulate the roll call.
I'm not
Are you kidding me, man? You just, that's out of bounds. I'm going to vote no then. See, you have played with this too much, Dick. You can't do that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You don't get to decide when we do this. This is the, wow. Call my name if you wish. The vote's no now.
Ms. Briggs, can you share with me the roll call order? Did I misspeak that you missed Mr. Poole? I thought you missed Mr. Poole.
Mr. Poole goes last today.
Okay, thank you. I apologize, my mistake.
It's okay. Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
No.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
No.
That motion passes by a 5-2 vote. That appeal is granted.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate everyone's comments, both for and against, and the Landmark Committee for the record.
Thanks, Scott.
Commissioners, you have before you several communications from staff recommending various legislation. Can I have a motion to accept these communications?
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Commissioners, we have 7 consent items to consider this evening. Do any of you wish to move any of these items to the regular agenda? Ms. Briggs, will you present the consent agenda?
Absolutely, President Brady. Up on your screen should be tonight's consent agenda. I do not know why I cannot get this to go into our slideshow mode, but item A is a liquor permit transfer for the High Miler located on Cleveland Road. Item B is a liquor permit transfer for the High Miler located on Venice Road. Item C is a liquor permit transfer for Better Ways LLC. Item D is a liquor permit transfer for the club. Item E are encroachments along Warren Street, of which there are 8. Item F is to adopt the 2020 Erie County Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan. And item G is to ratify emergency purchase of a Allen Bradley variable frequency drive at the wastewater treatment plant.
Having heard these ordinances, resolutions, and liquor permits, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I move to approve variously the several motions, the several ordinances, and the resolution under the consent agenda. Those are items A through G, and that the resolution and ordinances be passed variously under Section 13 or 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Heil, or Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinances, resolutions, and liquor permit transfers.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Those ordinances, resolutions, and notices to the Division of Liquor Control that we do not request hearing are approved. We'll now turn to our regular agenda. Ms. Briggs, will you present item number 1, please?
Absolutely, President Brady. Item number 1 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to purchase 15 Axon Fleet 3 in-car audio and video systems, including software, hardware, and accessories from Axon Enterprise Incorporated of Scottsdale, Arizona, for the Sandusky Police Department, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioner, have you heard this ordinance? How do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Who from staff would like to present that item? Aaron, are you with us?
I am, sir. I can speak to that if you need me to, Commission President.
Go ahead, Chief.
Our cruiser camera system is nearing the end of its maintenance cycle. The server is nearing the end of its life, so there's some expense that comes with that. Our current body-worn cameras are through Axon. They also maintain our tasers. Our goal here is to go to a single-source video. Obviously, in this day and age, video is the most important thing to help us with our transparency and just documenting every interaction we have and/or preserving evidence and all of the sort. Our cruiser cameras now don't have the capability that Axon offers us. There's a lot of fail-safes, a lot of other little things they have going on with this newest system. It's actually very, very important, and they've worked out a very good price for us. So I think this moves us into the next generation of cameras, and it would be very beneficial to the Sandusky Police Department.
Chief, pretty typical of 5-year rotation on equipment like that. We're out of date after 5 years.
It is, sir, but this newest system through Axon works a little differently. I don't foresee this cycling out after 5 years. Axon right now with our body-worn cameras actually gives us new cameras. I believe they're going to start replacing this equipment for us too as part of this, but it's all just part of the maintenance agreement right now.
Great. Additional questions or comments, Commissioners? Ms. Briggs, will you call the roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Briggs, you present item number 2, please.
Item number 2 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a sponsorship agreement with the Library Association of Sandusky, Ohio for programming events at the Jackson Street Pier, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Harris.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I may say, I just absolutely love this program. It gets so many people pointing and arguing about, that's great, that's stupid, whatever it is. And they say, well, then they start to think about, well, what is art? And then they get into this conversation, you know, and it causes people a little levity, causes a little reflection. If they're in a bad mood, they look at it, it distracts them, gets them back in a different frame of mind. Their walks, the groups organize walks around this artwork. And the fact that we get to rotate this is such a gift to us. And so I'm very grateful for what it is that we have here, and I'm very grateful for Lang Trust's support of this. And we get to have, a very, very expensive public art display that we could never afford on our own because it rotates all the time, every year. And I think it's been a great thing, and I love arguing with my kids and friends about what all of it means. We never agree, but that isn't the point.
Certainly, the Lang Trust has been responsible for a variety of programming, and the most wonderful thing I think about it is it's all free, and it's open to everybody, and you just have to show up, whether you're young or middle age or my age. Additional comments, Commissioners?
Your age is looking more like middle age.
I wasn't asking for that kind of a comment.
You asked.
Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on the motion?
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Sorry.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Mr. Proud, I see you waving in the background. I just want to let you know that there will be I presume you have a comment on legislation. There will be a point at the end of our meeting.
So she's the chair of the Lang Trust. She wanted to speak on behalf of the Lang as to this legislation.
Excellent. Now that we've passed the legislation, you probably have good things to say. Come on up.
Sorry, I should have clarified
If
that.
it failed, you'd probably be out of here by now.
Yeah, you might want to quit while you're here.
You can only hurt yourself now.
That's right. Maybe I shouldn't speak. But I'm Sarah Prout, and I am the chairman of the Lang Trust of the Sandusky Library. And I do appreciate you backing us in this and supporting us with this. The city has been a good partner with the Lang Trust and the library, and we're excited too to have all the sculptures in town. We hope to have another series of sculptures coming as soon as the requirements are lifted in Europe to get the Poland artists and installers out to install some suspension sculptures too, so we'll work on that. But actually, this $50,000 that we're suggesting to partner with the city for are concerts on Jackson Street Pier. And these were hopefully 4 concerts that we're going to present this summer, one in July, one in August, and 2 in September. Family friendly and typical of what Lang Trust has been noted for, and for its reputation. So that's what this request of partnership with is for this one.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
and
you.
Thanks to the Lang Trust.
Well, we're excited we're able to do this.
Thank you.
Ms. Briggs, I think we've had both votes on that, have we not? I think we're on to item. The next item.
Yeah, President Brady. Would you like me to read item number 3?
Item 3, I believe.
Okay. Item number 3 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a submerged lands lease with the state of Ohio, Ohio Department of Natural Resources for the Cedar Point Causeway wetland project related to the Sandusky Bay Initiative for property adjacent to Cedar Point Road, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, have you heard this ordinance? How do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Klein, I will save you some time if you can kind of fill in the blanks for us on this piece of legislation and perhaps companion legislation numbers 4 and 5 also pertain to this, so perhaps we can cut down your airtime somewhat and you can put it all together for us at once.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, Mr. President. So I'm assuming you guys are probably sick of hearing about this project. We've been talking about it for about 5 years now, and I assure you that we are getting close to bidding this project and actually seeing construction start. What we're looking at right now is when you have a project that is a pilot project and it's never been done in the Great Lakes before, we have to have a lot of conversation and check a lot of the regulatory boxes. And the first piece of legislation under item number 3 is to get that submerged land lease finalized with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. We already have the littoral rights that were given to us from Cedar Point to allow us to enter into this agreement, and it will only be for 1 year as it is a governmental non-income producing facility. The next item on the agenda, number 4, is acceptance of another $100,000. What we've encountered as we've gone through the project is a lot of additional regulatory requirements, and one of those issues is to determine the actual depth getting from the channel that will be dredged by the Corps of Engineers and seeing if their vessels can actually make it to where we will be constructing this wetland. So ODNR has supplied us with another $100,000 in grant money. That brings us up to right around 5.2 million with the various dollars that we've agreed to accept so far. And that doesn't include the $1 million that US EPA is giving to the Corps of Engineers to cover the dredging costs. And the last item on here is for KS Associates that will be doing the final construction plans. We expect to have those by the end of this month. And as I alluded to at the beginning, hopefully we can proceed with construction bidding in July. So I will be coming back for that, and that is part of the original, or part of the $4 million that was accepted back in June of last year.
Thanks, Mr. Klein. Commissioners, comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Brady.
Just advise the commission and the public, I will be abstaining on this piece of legislation and the next 2, as I have on a prior piece of related legislation that came before this commission, given the proximity of this particular project to my home. I don't know that I'm required to abstain because there's a significant body of water between us and this project, but I'm going to abstain out of caution.
Thank you. Ms. Briggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Abstain.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington.
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Abstain.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington.
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Briggs, you present item number 4, please.
Yes, President Brady. Item number 4 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to accept grant funds in the amount of $100,000 from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in cooperation with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency for the Cedar Point Causeway Wetland Project Phase 1 related to the Sandusky Bay Initiative, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiden.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Briggs, will you present item number 5, please?
Item number 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement for professional services with KS Associates Incorporated of Elyria, Ohio, for the Cedar Point Causeway Wetland Project Phase 1 related to the Sandusky Bay Initiative, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Briggs, will you present item number 6, please?
Item number 6 is an ordinance creating a designated outdoor refreshment area, establishing requirements to ensure public health and safety within such area, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension and rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I was initially concerned because of the size of this, Dora being outside, the length of it, going actually through downtown east. And then I met with, my concerns, I guess, were litter and safety. But a few weeks ago, I met with our police chief and Mr. Holliday, and they seem to think that we can handle this. I know going in the future, if it does get disruptive, that any 4 commissioners can squeeze this back down or shrink it down if we do run into any type of problems. So, but I'm going to support it tonight.
Additional comments or questions, Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
a couple questions. Police Chief, I just wanted to clarify for sure. Are you going to be able to manage this without overtime?
Yes, sir, Mr. Commissioner. I believe we'll be able to handle this. I don't foresee any issues with overtime. Our staffing levels are what they are, but we're constantly downtown. We started bike patrol last week, and we intend on doing that. And obviously, we'll evaluate the program after we're at a couple weeks in and see if we need to adjust something. But I don't foresee any issues with overtime. I think this is probably going to be, something that's going to bring excitement to downtown, and I don't foresee a real policing issue. Littering, trash, things like that, we're really going to have to monitor and watch. But again, I'm not really too concerned.
I agree. I expect the same thing, but I did want to bring to the table for the commission. This door is intended to, as expected, to bring additional people downtown. And the concept of if it does begin draining additional resources to make it work, coming up, that's why I asked about the police department. If we're going to be, if it should become a problem, I think that the Dora, those who are benefiting from the Dora downtown should expect that the city's going to be looking for a way for them to compensate us for that. I don't really believe that taking resources from the rest of the community just to add business profits to small businesses. If you need special security for your event, even when we do special events, if you need additional security, you're expected to pay. I truly expect to be no problem with this, but I want to put it out there for, you can either discuss it now or consider it later, but if the additional expenses caused by this that cause extraordinary resources should be covered by the businesses that are benefiting. Additionally, I did want to say that, ask this, Mr. Horstman, could you explain to me why Washington Park is included in this? What's the benefit? I do have a problem with it, and I just need to understand before I step out there what exactly makes it so important that Washington Park be included.
Through Commission President to Commissioner Poole, this was a topic of discussion among staff and others who have discussed the boundaries. I think there were a couple of considerations taken into account for that, one of which being any special events that take place in Washington Park, like events at the gazebo or any of the car shows or farmers markets, things of that nature that it may be advantageous for patrons to utilize this through Washington Park. And based on other conversations with peer cities that have done it, I think we initially had a concern about whether to include a park piece like that, but we're rather put at ease by saying how other cities have included their main square and have had generally positive feedback about that. So those, I think, were the primary considerations for including that within the boundary.
May I ask, you said there is this overwhelming support of the folks for like the Ohio State Band and those folks that use the gazebo, the various events they have there. Did they actually come to you and ask that they wanted to go downtown, buy a beer, and carry it back for those events? Or did you just amongst yourselves decide that this seemed like a good idea?
They're among like that specific group. That was not the one that we heard from. I know anecdotally there were other conversations among certain staff that I think have received positive interest in having opportunities to be able to do that on the park. But no, that was not one that we heard from specifically.
Who is it that you actually heard from that utilizes that space routinely?
Related to the Washington Park.
Yeah, that's all.
Not one that I have offhand right in front of me, so I can't give a clear answer to that right now.
Okay, commissioners, I would suggest that there are more citizens of Sandusky than the 20 and 30 somethings and whoever that want to drink. And Washington Park is simply a place that I'm not sure it's really necessary to make this successful, that folks have no place to go downtown to sit quietly, read a book, enjoy your lunch, without some 20-something stumbling by with a beer. It just seems unnecessary. I'm sorry. I realize I am representing those that are not in the avant-garde of Sandusky now, for everything is 20-somethings and over. We got to have beer and liquor and excitement for going on. But I would suggest that we've just gone a little bit overboard with taking over Washington Park. I mean, we got the boy with the boot. We've got the monuments to various clubs, Martin Luther King, and just there's no place now that anybody can go to get away from the party gang. And I think it's not necessary. And if we open to whatever else you have to say, what Mr. Horstman said is essentially the staff got together and decided it was a good idea. Nobody said no, so I guess it's all right. Additionally, I would suggest that as I look at this, I had a resident of, just if you look on at the Chesapeake, folks that live on the ground floor out on the bay, 12 o'clock at night, folks drinking on their back outside their patios is probably not real necessary. And really, I'm saying it's nice that it was so easy to draw this, but the suggestion that other than the core of downtown is necessary for this is, I think, it's just overdone. Washington Park, I can't move on. It makes no sense to me. The rest of them, if they don't complain later, that's fine, but to leave folks who don't particularly drink or want to have all that noise and activity around, there's no reason for us to give them no place to go.
Additional comments or questions, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser?
I think what Mr. Waddington said is we can reevaluate this. We can even do it annually. We don't have to wait that long. And 4 of us can change if we all start getting complaints or Chief Oliver comes to us and recommends that we change it. We do evaluate it at that time. As far as small business is concerned, if this does in fact help their business out and add to their business, I think it'd behoove them to police their own area and watch for the litter. I believe that might be the problem, is the empty cups and the crap running around. So if the businesses are benefiting from this, they probably should have staff looking out for the litter, because not expect the city staff to go around and follow up for that. So, and I'll be supporting this thing.
Mr. Ames, Mr. Horstman, Mr. Ames, a resident, had questions regarding this DORA legislation, and I think the answer to his questions are all included in the documents that you shared with us. I think perhaps they dealt with litter, they dealt with safety. Can you just touch on just share with us and share with for the record that this is not a half-baked idea, that this is an idea that has restrictions included in it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'll defer to the comments that Chief Oliver also made. To reiterate, I think that answers Mr. Ames some of his questions as well. The state of Ohio mandates that as part of this application, we submit a safety plan and a sanitation plan, which outlines essentially how to ensure public safety and to ensure public health and sanitation downtown too. So as part of that, we included our regular patrols. The Chief Oliver indicated that he believed that to be sufficient, as we heard. It shouldn't put additional stress on the police department, and that's in line with the probably 10 to 15 communities that we have spoken with over the last 6 months or so, that they've all have expressed that none of them have had to add additional patrols beyond what they normally do in their downtown district. The sanitation plan included is also something that will be constantly reviewed as we put in the application by the city manager's office and Department of Public Works to ensure that that litter is not a problem, and that be working with businesses to ensure that they can help us with that too. So I think the other component of this is any patron that wants to consume a beverage outside in the public right of way along with the program must purchase it directly from a participating business establishment. It's in a specific cup so that enforcement can see it. And so it's very much not a system in which you're opening it up to have people being able to bring their own alcohol from home or the corner store and consume it within the boundaries. So the state puts a lot of restrictions on it, and it does have to be reviewed every 5 years by state law. But anytime the city or city commission wants to review it beforehand, as Commissioner Waddington and Commissioner Meiser mentioned, that is very true. And this can be dissolved or modified with a simple vote of city commission at any moment.
Thank you, Mr. Horstman. Additional comments, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Murray.
I will be abstaining from this legislation as well. I should have gone home early, but the DORA includes my office property. I want to make it clear, though, that we're not changing our business model.
No taverns at Doreen?
No taverns.
Commissioner President, could I?
Mr. Webster.
Through the Commission President, I just want to commend Tom. I know there were some questions about the process that was used, but Tom, during a transition for him at a really difficult time in this office from a planner to a transit administrator, where we lost basically all of our planners, some of which to circumstances beyond our control, did a really good job in a deliberate process of engaging the community. And I believe he visited over 10 DORAs throughout the state over the last 6 months on his own time outside of work. And so, again, I think we've heard a lot from different individuals as to the precautions that are in place should there be anything that needs to be adjusted. But a lot of thoughtful work went into this, and I think it will be a well-run program.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Ms. Spriggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Abstain.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Abstain.
Mr. Brady,
Yes.
Ms. Twine,
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington,
Yes.
Mr. Poole.
Yes.
That ordinance is passed. Ms. Spriggs, would you present the last item not on our agenda, but an item that was walked in this afternoon due to some very specific time constraints that we had at putting together an application that is very significant?
Yes, Commission President Brady. Item number 7 is a resolution authorizing the filing of a grant application with the U.S. Department of Transportation for discretionary grant funding through the fiscal year 2021 Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity grant program for the Sandusky Bay Pathway, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Harris.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Motion and a second discussion. Mr. Klein, this is very, very big money.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. And first, I'd like to apologize to the commission and the residents that this was walked on at the last minute. The city manager read at the May 25th meeting that we would be applying for these funds, but that we would come back if awarded. And I found out on Friday that we actually need to have a resolution from the commission allowing us to apply prior to submitting that application. So what we're looking at here is the numbers on the communication don't actually add up. The total budget for the project is estimated at just under $30 million, and that includes the pier track bridge, all the amenities, and everything that's left on the Sandusky Bay Pathway outside of the landing and anything that's already built. So the connector over at the Monroe and Edgewater neighborhood that would connect to the current terminus at the west end of the downtown piece, and to Lions Park and to Venice Road. The portion down First Street as well that would connect to eventually to Meg Street, which is a project that would be going next year. This includes all the wayfinding, all the educational signage, all the amenities, the bridge. It's a pretty large project, but that $30 million price tag does include the design and acquisition. So that's why those numbers don't add up. The $18.97 million ask is 70% of the total construction of the project, and the 8.1 million is 30%, which would be the city's contribution towards that. Right now, that money would be paid for through the various TIFs, capital funds, or Issue 8 funds that have already been set up. So again, I want to apologize for walking this on such late notice.
Questions or comments, Commissioners? Mr. Klein, there's also the local match of $8 million. Where are you going to get that money?
Yeah, that money right now, it's planned through Issue 8 capital funds or the various TIFs that we have for downtown or for the Cedar, the one on the Cleveland Road TIF. So as we move forward with this project, that's always how it had been intended to be paid for. So what this will actually do is allow us to speed up the project. And instead of doing it piecemeal in smaller parts here and there over the next 5 to 10 years, this will allow us to do one big project as soon as we get all of the acquisition completed, if we can move forward quickly.
Thank you. Additional comments, Commissioners? Ms. Briggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the resolution.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That resolution is passed. That concludes our regular agenda. Turn now to our city manager for his report. Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Commission President, Commissioners, audience, and staff. I'll start with the donations. We'd like to make a thank you to Cedar Point for their in-kind donation of tropical plants and flowers valued at $1,000 to the Sandusky Greenhouse.
Can I have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks to Cedar Point.
Thank you. Moving on to new and old business for the police. Sergeant Kevin Yuskevitz retired from the department on Thursday, June 10th. He served the community with professionalism and pride for over 21 years. Congratulations and enjoy your retirement, Sergeant. Kevin is very much a Sandusky person, and his family are Sandusky people, and that showed in the way that he served the community, and so we're very grateful for his service and hope to continue his involvement with the city. Also, Officer Anthony Bath was promoted to the rank of sergeant on Friday, June 11th. We look forward to watching him grow in his new leadership role as a supervisor. And an update on fire. A firefighter entrance exam was given through the National Testing Network, and a total of 58 people took that test. The physical agility test was given June 8th through 10th. The new entrance exam list will be certified at the next Civil Service Commission meeting on June 22nd at 3:30 p.m. For Finance, the next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for this Friday, June 18th at 8 a.m. For Public Works, a grant update. The Brownfields grant application submitted to US EPA and the two transportation alternative applications submitted to the Erie County MPO for the Meadowwood subdivision sidewalk project in Hancock School will not receive funding. Staff is going to continue to investigate other funding opportunities for those projects. Also, all of the drinking fountains are up and running in the parks. COVID-19 warning signs have been removed from playgrounds and restrooms. And a congratulations to Brandon Doherty for his promotion to plant maintenance at the wastewater treatment plant. Brendan was previously an operator at the same facility. Also, I'd like to welcome Matt Cullen and Michael Bush, who have started in the sewer maintenance division. And the local street resurfacing project and the Camp Street resurfacing project will begin on Wednesday or Thursday of this week. The contractor will be working in zones, with the first zone being within the residential neighborhood around Barker, Clinton, Harrison, and Pearl. We urge all residents to stay up to date through the city's website and to pay attention to all of the no parking signs, which will be used as needed for daily contractor tasks. Over 1,500 notification letters have been forwarded to abutting residents, and there will always be a representative from the city or contractor on site while work is going on to assist with any immediate needs. Please contact Megan Stuckey at 419-627-5878 with any questions. For community development, an update that the department intends to bid asbestos abatement and demolition of 3 city-owned properties that surround Churchwell Park, 2132 Parkview Boulevard, a 4-unit vacant structure, 1501 South Forest, a 2-unit vacant structure, and 2111 Parkview Boulevard, a 4-unit vacant structure, will be funded by CDBG funding. The city also released the newest program to assist nonprofit organizations, including religious entities that offer food and/or meals and personal hygiene products to low or moderate income individuals or families free of cost, as well as delivery of food or meals free of cost. The new program is called COVID-19 Food Assistance Grant Program, and applications can be accessed through the city website at www.cityofsandusky.com/CDBG. Applications are due to the City of Sandusky by 5 p.m. Monday, June 21st, or 1 week from today. 5 of the Cold Creek lots are under contract to be sold at full asking price, and we continue to see strong interest in that area, as well as other lots that the city owns throughout the city. Also, the planning department, the department is pleased to announce the hiring of Erin Blair as chief planner. Erin will start work on June 21st. She will join assistant planner Alec Ox in the planning division. Alec joined the city this past May and is off to a great start. The next Arts and Culture Commission meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 15th at 5:15 p.m. Landmark Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, June 16th at 5 p.m. BZA is scheduled for Tuesday, June 17th at 4:30 p.m. And the Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, June 23rd at 5 p.m. For Sandusky Transit, ridership continues to improve over numbers from 2020. In May of 2021, fixed ridership was 17,085 trips, a 144% increase over May of 2020, but still 31% lower than May of 19. Demand response service had 1,773 passenger trips in May 2021. You can find full ridership data on SanduskyTransit.com every month, but we do see it. We're slowly getting back to those pre-pandemic levels, and we'll continue to hopefully make that climb. And then finally, for recreation, the Sandusky Rec Department would like to thank the Whiteman Weaver Safety Fair and Kids Fun Fest Committee for sponsoring the 2021 Movies by the Bay program for this summer's. Movies by the Bay will be shown on the new Fire Island Regional Health System LED screen at the Jackson Street Pier on Tuesday nights this summer starting at 7 p.m. For a full listing of dates and movies, you can visit www.cityofsandusky.com. But I saw the list, and it's a diverse list of really great movies that should attract a lot of families to the waterfront. That concludes my remarks for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the city manager, Commissioner? No questions. You get off the hook easy. Next item on our agenda are items of old business. Commissioners, any items of old business? Items of new business, Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Waddington.
I sent an email out to all the commissioners early this morning and the city manager about changing the name of a small park. It's on the Erie Boulevard neighborhood. They have that designation there, but it's right across the Marathon. It's on Erie Boulevard, Cleveland Road, and I'm asking under new business tonight to name this small park area the Taylor and Floor Park. I worked along with Mr. Floor. I'm repurposing this area and several other park areas. This was a shining moment for him as neighborhood coordinator prior to being laid off. I owe this to his young spirit of being a caring leader to the city of Sandusky. I know Mr. Murray was there for the ribbon cutting, and we had several residents. I think we had 3 different meetings there, and all the folks, they loved him and loved the park area, and it has no name. So I just thought it'd be fitting since, dying at such a young age. And I believe he would have went on to be something bigger than the city of Sandusky had he lived.
I will second that motion. And if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Murray.
Mr. Floor was a wonderful human being, and we are so much at a loss to understand why he was taken away early. That always happens when someone leaves us. It leaves us with a sense that we need to rededicate ourselves for a lot of different things, for our family, for the causes that he believed in. And I agree with Mr. Waddington. He was going to go a lot farther than anyone in this room. And he was a very capable young man. We were delighted to have him here for the period of time that we had him. I think he was a bird who was going to fly free. And I'm so sorry that he's gone. I've known his grandparents for many years. Did not know his mother, but I've known his grandparents for many years. All extremely fine people, and we are lucky every time we have a young person like that comes back to Sandusky and wants to call Sandusky home. So I think it's quite fitting that we name the park after him. Thank you for the suggestion.
I'd like to add one other thing, if I could, Mr. Chairman. How many people could stand in the back of this room and say thanks for the job? That got me when we called him back from being laid off.
Mr. Waddington's referring to the week after Talon and 30 other co-workers were let go during our pandemic situation. Talon stood in the back of a 2.5-hour-long commission meeting to get to the last item on our agenda, which is the opportunity for residents to speak on any issue. So he stood there for 2.5 hours simply to thank us for giving an opportunity to work in the city. That speaks to the quality of that individual. And I support your motion, Mr. Waddington. He was a fine individual, taken from us too soon. And I think that it's probably incumbent on all of us to not just name a park after him, but honor his memory by reaching out and getting into the community much like he did.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly support renaming the park, as already mentioned, and from the service that was held for him. Talon was a talented individual. He was young, but he loved what he did for the community. His parents, his grandparents, his family could be very, very proud of the things that Talon did. And yes, he was gone way too soon. And sitting there in the service, sometimes, we're not supposed to question God on what he does, but it's just like, this young man was just such a force, but he was a quiet force. He was a very, very strong individual, believed in what he believed in. And he was not loud or boisterous. Now, he could get loud and boisterous, but that was not his regular way of operating. And so he will be sorely missed. But I think it is appropriate for us to rename that park after Talon, who put so much time and energy into the neighborhoods in this community. Again, he loves Sandusky with every part of his being. And again, it saddens me to see that he's no longer here, but with some small gestures such as this, we'd like to remember him.
I think I could probably, we could pass that motion on a voice vote, but I think it's more appropriate that we have a roll call vote. Mr. Briggs, if you'd call roll on that motion, please.
Mr. Harris?
Absolutely.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That motion is passed. Additional items of new business.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
just one thought. I might have been asked the manager, I'm not sure which. Has anybody paid any attention to these electric scooters flying up and down Shoreline Drive? I'd just like to know if, they seem to go very fast compared to walkers.
Yeah.
And is there something we need to do, pay attention, they're okay, we're gonna have to live with it? I almost got run over by one yesterday, and it was like, ooh.
So through the commission president to the commission, I know we're working on formalizing agreement with the scooter company, Scooter Ding Ding, which is owned by a local group of investors. And it does include speed moderation. I think they can go upwards of 15 miles per hour, which is the same speed of bike.
Go faster than that, please.
But that they should be, the scooter should be set, we can confirm that they are, to only be able to go that fast if they're being operated through the private rental system. And that is the speed that we allow bikes to also travel on the pathway. And we are looking, so as far as the rules that are being developed for use on the pathway itself, electric operated bikes and scooters are appropriate. Anything that is motor operated or of a certain weight, including like a golf cart, would not be permitted, and that's relatively standard. I have seen a lot of activity in the scooters, but I've also heard many, many positive comments about how many young people and what a diverse group it's actually bringing into the downtown that don't normally find it. So I've actually been very pleasantly surprised, and most of the people I've talked to have been thrilled with the increased vibrancy and activity that come from the scooters. But just like we talked about with some of these other things like the Dora, it is a year-to-year agreement that we're looking to enter into with Scooter Ding Ding. And if we have issues, we can always further regulate this, if there are things that people see, whether it's related to speed or where they're operating. But I do, while certainly there have been a few questions as to how many there are, how fast they might be going, the vast majority of the comments that I have received are that there is a new vibrancy on Shoreline Drive this summer. The scooters have been a pretty big part of that. So, Brendan, if you want to add anything about the agreement.
I mean, that's correct. And also, there's also existing state laws and some local laws that apply to scooters. The city manager is correct. Scooters have to operate at certain speeds, just like e-bikes. If they operate faster than that, they would be in violation of state law and actually can be cited for that. And it also caps what can and can't be used on the pathway, which again, is limited to certain vehicles that are only operated at lower speeds for safety.
What is the law? Speed? What is it?
I believe it's 18 miles per hour usually for both e-bikes and scooters, but I can double check that.
That's on the street, that's on the sidewalk then?
It's
They
every,
cannot-
like, that's the total cap. Like, the way e-bikes and scooters are, it's if they can go faster than that, they don't fit into the classifications that can be used on things like sidewalks and pathways and multi-use paths.
Okay, so they have that, and really, I'm just to clarify so that people are not expecting things that the law does not allow us to do.
Yeah.
E-bikes and these scooters may be ridden on the sidewalk, correct?
Scooters may be written on the sidewalk, and
Electric
certain classifications of e-bikes. I'm sorry to lawyer this one, but there's a class of e-bikes that cannot be written on sidewalks.
It really
because they go too
it only
fast.
matters with the ones that we have, and the fact is, it's, to the naked eye, these travel at a speed that's unsafe, where people are walking. And so all we're really talking about is the ones we have here, and you can take your time on the rest of them.
Sure.
But what we're seeing now for the last 2 weeks is a racetrack going up and down those sidewalks. And, you know, I'm glad you're writing something, but how soon are we going to get this under control? And since I pay at a whole police department with radar guns, you can establish how fast they're going easily enough. So the concept of guessing isn't necessary.
Sure.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman,
Commissioner Murray?
all I wanted to add is that when I first saw the bikes, I think in Columbus, maybe it was in Cincinnati, I wondered about it, and I've read a lot of newspaper articles, and now you can read all day long about how different cities have kind of wrestled with these and put limits on what's appropriate. We're not the first ones to have to encounter this issue. I think there's a lot to be learned from what other communities have done. Generally speaking, my impression is that these things have an initial a period of excitement, and then after that, it settles down, and you have the occasional nut who says, "Watch this, hold my beer," which is usually, which I'm told by an ER doc, is the last thing that is the most commonly said before people visit the ER. But with those exceptions, I think they do generally tend to settle down.
If I could, just one more through the commission president to the commission. Dennis was speaking, and it reminded me, one of the things that we like about the company that is coming to Sandusky, and I've seen this in my time in Cleveland, is that some of these scooter companies, you can end your trip wherever and just lay the scooter down on the sidewalk wherever it lays, which I think is looks disheveled or, disorganized for the city. But this company, you actually can't stop your meter on the app to be charged until you bring it back to one of the designated parking areas, which are spread across. So you will see less clutter in downtown because of the model that I guess we've chosen to partner with, which I think will be helpful a little bit towards a slightly better experience for those who aren't using the scooters.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Meiser?
I was just going to say, I did watch a couple close calls with, they look very young. Of course, everybody looks young to me anymore, but, and they blew across the street, in front of vehicles. I think it appears to me that they might not have brakes on them. I don't know if it's necessarily speed, but stopping them, it might be the issue. So it might be more an educational issue with the young people or age limits. I don't know what it is, but I did see a couple almost get hit by a car a couple times on Water Street where Shoreline comes across right there and crosses. Must be Franklin maybe, right there. I've seen kids shoot through there.
Transit drivers have complained about it too.
Pardon?
Transit drivers have complained about them shooting.
And they jump off and they're running alongside of it, so it seems to keep going.
Additional items of new business, commissioners. Ms. Briggs, are there any communication from residents regarding city business? I believe you already read Mr. Lamarca's question, which had to do with non-agenda items, have you not?
I did read that. I can reread it though if you would like.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lamarca from 206 48th Street in Sandusky said, "I'm concerned about the hazardous situation created by the mailboxes and bike path along Venice Road. Probably 2,000 plus cars travel that road daily versus the 5 to 6 bikes and golf carts a week. You should have also included a turn lane onto Thorpe. What were you thinking and what are your plans to fix this?"
Mr. Klein, I'm not going to put you on the spot to respond to that, but I would ask that you develop an answer for Mr. Lamarca and respond to him. Any residents would like to provide a comment on any item affecting city business, now is your opportunity to step to the microphone, identify yourself, and we ask you to keep it to 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Ashburn, and I'm residing at 2112 Parkview Boulevard in the MacArthur Park area. The city recently purchased the building right across the street from me and evicted 3 families in the process of doing that. One of those families didn't have any place to go, and they went to the homeless shelter. I purchased a building in MacArthur Park 10 years ago that was a crack house that people I knew lived there. When I retired from Washington, D.C., I moved back to Sandusky. And I live there. We've renovated the building that I owned. We have 3 reputable families that are living there. There are several buildings in MacArthur Park that you are slating to tear down. And when you're doing that, you're evicting the poor people. All of the money that you're spending downtown, you need to spend some of that in the neighborhoods. MacArthur Park could be a thriving area. The land is beautiful. It could be a thriving area. It could be a park view for poor people. And Sandusky has a substantial homeless population and a substantial poor population that this council is not addressing. We need to move the funds. You can spend $99 million downtown, but please spend at least $1 million in the neighborhoods. And please don't tear down, you're slated to tear down the building across the street from me. It can be renovated and poor people can have a good place to live, just like I've renovated the building that I'm in. It takes time and it takes money, but we're willing to put that into it. I'm asking, I heard the city manager say something about 21 Parkview, which is why I perked up, because I think it was slated to be torn down. And a gentleman named Jonathan Holliday called me and told me that they were getting ready to tear that building down. And don't tear the buildings down. Let people who have lived there, like me, who have renovated their area, who are providing housing for poor people, which are innocent, which need places to stay, rather than going to the homeless shelter. I don't know if this was the right time to bring that up, but I mean, just in a little bit of time that I've been sitting here, there's like $3.5 million. It's going, $30 million is going for a bike path. When you have so many poor people who need places to stay, and then you're tearing down the places where they are staying, and they have to go to homeless shelters. That just isn't right. I have no clout. I have no money. I'm a retired school teacher using my retirement funds. But providing housing for 3 families. I have 3 families in my building. I pay the utilities. They just can't afford to go anyplace else. And Sandusky is rich. Sandusky has more than enough to put some of this money back into the neighborhoods.
Thank you, Ms. Ashby. Any additional comments from residents? Sir?
I'll be very quick. Thank you for that. The quandary I have, I'm a real estate agent, part of the old House Guild Board, what is old, and as you get older, what is old? Do you go back and save something from the 1600s, 1700s, 1900s? I'm old, from the 1900s, but I agree with you. I've always felt moving here in 1996 that our streets should be paved with gold. When we and I guess not get long-winded and be short about that, that is a quandary. I've always thought, when I moved here in 1996, we had 60% rental in Sandusky, meaning that when you go out there and look at all the housing, 60% of our housing is not owned by people. It's rental property. Now we're up to 70%. And we need to come up with some program in the city that will help people like you rent to get the path to home ownership. You know, I mean, I realize we lost $267,000 7-8 years ago. I don't have my numbers in a row. That we had to get back to the federal government because when we had housing money for buying in Sandusky, nobody qualified to buy a home. Well, they didn't qualify to buy a home because nobody taught them what they needed to do to qualify to buy a home. So to finish up and say, I'm glad I'm here tonight. I ran an association of 2,000 realtors out in Lake County, Ohio. I moved here in '96. I became a selfish citizen. I lived here and enjoyed everything for me. And as I get older, my opinions get stronger, as I mentioned before, and my mouth gets weaker. And I'm glad I'm at that point right now. I'm going to throw it out there. You know, Sharon doesn't know me, but I'm going to be Sharon's surrogate son. You're going to see me a lot more, hopefully. I usually work on Monday nights. And I want, with all due respect, I want your skeleton to relax. Whenever we come here as a community to say no or maybe, there's a yes there somewhere. It's not that we're saying no. And I think our city's so used to, you know, new ideas are not good. The old ideas are not good. You know, the progressive ideas are not good. So simply to say, I don't know how to solve that. You brought a tear to my eye. With that, I only have myself in what I'm involved in community with my boards that I sit on and being a citizen here. And I would like to throw out that maybe in the future we could do something when ours, and I called him, he knows this already. Like I said, everybody gets to know the name Schramm eventually. I called our city manager when he gave him a raise and I said, we're going to hold you accountable for that raise. I'm not saying you don't deserve that, but when the city mayor of Cleveland, Ohio, with hundreds of thousands of people, makes less than what our city manager here makes with 28, 30,000 people, we are wasting some money. And again, I'm not saying any of you aren't worth your weight in gold, but we can't talk about things and complain about things. I learned a long time ago, and I'll shut up. You know, well, you can't complain about things you allow. And I think we're allowing a lot of things there, and I take responsibility tonight. I'm actually upset that they left already. I supported their project. They didn't have the common courtesy to sit here to the end of the commission meeting with a yes vote. Makes me want to change my vote. So anyway, that's it. I'm glad to be here. I plan to be proactive, not a rebel, but be proactive. And thank you for bringing that point up.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Poole.
Just like to comment that this has brought up something that's going on. We have a disconnect between the people who actually live in MacArthur Park. And MacArthur Park is the farthest property almost, well, going south from the lake, any place at all. And I would suggest that her comment about it's a place that poor people could build and have a place to live, I tend to agree. I'm trying to figure out why we are buying up properties, and since we're not going to get them all, what we're planning to put in there that is going to attract who? I mean, it's one thing, I realize you're driving out the poorest of those who are in our community to homeless shelters, and I'm not sure that's good. I mean, I'd said that before. But this concept, if you think we're going to spend $100,000 on a consultant to tell us to do something extraordinary with that area, I'm having trouble figuring out who those people are that want to go there. They're going to. It's next to an industrial plant that across the street. The outer ring has been rehabbed by folks who, like Ms. Ashburn, and so you're not. It's going to be a mixed. I'm not sure what it could be. I've said before, I'm not sure we need to be buying those properties, and especially with no idea what to do with. I would ask, what do we plan to do after we own whatever it is we plan to buy with Mrs. Ashburn's property? and those people around her who have also built up their properties and are renting them to people in need. I mean, having someone who actually is concerned about those with less means than we have is heartwarming. Thank you so much for what you do. I realize that using your salary, your pension to make sure that there's housing for people with less means than you is something that we wish more people did, and somehow or another, I think the city needs to rethink our position on what we're doing out there, what we're doing to those individuals. I don't know what to say about, I'm embarrassed that we sent people to a homeless shelter from a piece of property that the taxes were being paid and the property was perfectly usable because it was being rented. I'm just embarrassed.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Dwight.
I appreciate Ms. Ashburn's comments tonight, and also what Commissioner Poole is saying. But I think we also need to, it is not our intention or our desire to make homeless people. Yes, we do need to figure out a way to fix that problem, but I will also say that a lot of those properties out in the MacArthur Park area should have been torn down or properly renovated a long time ago. Now, when we say we have poor people living out there, some of those homes are inappropriate for anyone, regardless of what economic status that they're in, to live out there. And so we are working to try to strike a balance with renovating, tearing down and rebuilding back up. But it is a process. And while we go through that process, there are sometimes things that happen that appear like that we're heartless and that we are not caring. And so I do believe Ms. Ashburn brought out some things that, again, as the realtor mentioned, we need to figure out some type of way that we can provide some assistance. And I don't know what that is. But I appreciate bringing forth that information. Again, it's not the city's desire or our will to make people homeless, but we are trying to improve the area so that we have affordable housing. And yes, if we need to figure out some kind of way to provide opportunities for people who may not regularly or normally have an opportunity to purchase housing, we need to figure those things out. And so again, appreciate the comments tonight, but I think it's inappropriate for us as a city to continue to leave structures, again, in place. And this was one of the things we had talked about and we had started doing a number of years ago with compliance with landlords and making sure that appropriate housing is being rented to people. So again, appreciate the comments tonight, the emotion and the feelings. So we are not deliberately trying to make people homeless, but we are trying to improve the properties that people have the ability to rent or live in.
Mr. Whoops, you had a question?
If Mrs. Ashburn wants to speak first, I would
Ms.
yield to her.
Ashburn.
As I said, I've been owning property there for 10 years now, and if there is any plan that's going on, you haven't shared it with the people that are there. And I saw last week 3 families being evicted.
I don't dispute that you saw people
whatever plan
evicted.
there is that's going on, you need to include the residents in that. You need to let the people that are building it up have a say in that. And then there were 2 buildings, one next to me and one over here, and I had written an email, something about the buildings, that I had interest in the buildings, and the next week they were torn down.
Okay.
So you're not including us in what you're doing. So if you're doing it, let us know, and let us have a part in it. I don't want to get angry.
If I could, through the commission president, I'm hearing Mrs. Ashburn, and I know that she wants absolutely what is best for her neighborhood and for the people that call that neighborhood home. And I will say that we have been doing outreach. I met with Mrs. Ashburn, and Jonathan and I have actually been meeting with individuals in the South Side neighborhood, including Dora Grant, including Jamarcus Hampton, who has rehabbed, I believe, 8 houses over in that neighborhood, including the Sandusky City Schools. And we've actually asked each of those, Tandra Frisbee has met with us as well, to give us names of more residents that we can meet with. And if you remember, Mrs. Ashburn mentioned that she got a call from Jonathan Holliday about these houses that are on tonight's manager's report. That was because I said to Jonathan, don't buy anything else out there without calling Mrs. Ashburn or others, including Jamarcus, who've expressed potential interest in some of those properties. So we are doing our best to try to describe what our strategy is. We know it is a complicated strategy because we do want to build up, but there is a genuine belief, and this was set with myself and Matt Lasko and many others who participated when we were putting together the comprehensive plan, was that some of that housing there is so substandard that you can't put enough money back into it to bring it up to a standard where it would justify the investment. And we don't believe that's true of every property in that neighborhood, but of many properties in that neighborhood. And the goal is to consolidate enough land, and this gets to Commissioner Poole's statement as to what is the plan there. We do believe that this is a place where quality affordable housing should exist in a quality neighborhood. And so I know the commission, Commissioner Poole is cynical maybe about what the South Side plan can bring, but we are intending, as soon as we get the new chief planner on board, to issue the RFQ for that South Side master plan that is going to look at several things, just so I'm being as transparent as possible as what I believe, and will take my direction from the city commission and others as to what that plan should be. But the goal is to have a resident-led initiative in that neighborhood to ask them directly what they hope for their future. We want students to be involved in that because of the massive investments that have been made in the South Side neighborhood by the Sandusky City Schools. We want the hospital to be involved in that because of the massive presence that they have throughout the South Side neighborhood. We think that there are great possibilities for employment in that neighborhood because KBI is potentially coming back as a usable facility that is right across the street, and that is in large part why that neighborhood exists from the beginning. So what our goal is to do is to provide as much quality, affordable housing that is safe and walkable to things like a revitalized Churchwell Park, to those new Sandusky City Schools, to healthcare and employment opportunities at the KBI and the hospital, and to provide programming with those things. And you'll see, and I know you haven't seen the draft yet of the stimulus plan, but there's a specific section of the stimulus plan with 4 projects labeled as Southside Master Plan implementation that gets at many of these things. So I know it's hard to ask folks like Mrs. Ashburn, who are toiling away in neighborhoods like this, to wait a little bit longer, but that outreach has begun. And again, this is we've lost the planners that were doing this work, but we're putting that back on. Our housing resources are being spent significantly in that neighborhood. Our infrastructure dollars, whether it's those park or recreation projects or the Hayes Avenue upcoming investments that'll be made there to make it more walkable. But this is a neighborhood that we care about very deeply. And we know that we don't necessarily have all the answers, but it really is to provide that affordable housing with great quality of life and educational, health, and wellness opportunities for the people that grow up in that neighborhood. And we just have to prove that over the next year. And then even more importantly, as we begin to implement the plan coming out of its adoption. But that outreach has begun, and again, I'm happy to follow up with this afterwards, but that's why Jonathan called you, was as a follow-up to our call, and we know it's taken us a little bit longer to get going, but I have an open door, and I'd love to continue this conversation.
Jonathan told me that the plan for the city was to purchase and demolish. Those are his words, purchase and demolish. And he said, and we're going to put up a water spout across from you. What? And, a water spout with 3 families have been evicted.
Mr. Wipser, what I'm going to recommend is certainly not a fix to this problem. I think overall we have a plan going forward. I do think that your plan is to share that with the residents and to roll that out sooner the better. But what I'm going to suggest is I think the piece that we missed here, and I don't want to have it missed after 7:30 tonight, is that if we take over a piece of property, I want staff to take the people that are in that property being displaced, and I want them to be shepherded to another dwelling and not just cut loose. It sounds like if that's really a small piece of the puzzle. I'm not saying the city pays for their rent. I'm just saying they take them by the hand and expose them to another place to live. because we're all very uncomfortable
Absolutely.
with making someone
I just want to
homeless.
make it clear that the units we're purchasing, or that we're, through the chairman, talking about tonight, are using CDBG funds. There's a federal relocation act. We would not be legally allowed to move people out of those units without doing exactly what you just said. These are all already vacant properties. Now, we have not always used federal dollars for those funds, and we've used real estate funds, so it's not to say that there haven't been at times tenants and properties that we bought that needed to be relocated by the landlord, but the properties that are on there tonight, there's a federal law, the Federal Relocation Act, where we could never just evict these people and put them out. We'd actually have to pay for the relocation.
Okay.
And I think it's stated in that city manager report, those are all vacant properties already, because I know when Matt was here, he wouldn't have touched with CDBG dollars a property that had residents in it due to the burdensome requirements of the Federal Relocation Act. So your point is well taken. And again, I agree completely that we need to do the outreach. And by the way, the water spout is because the thing that we've heard from residents of that neighborhood more than anything is they want a splash pad there like the ones that we have in Huron Park and Lions Park. So Jonathan was probably giving an example of what's probably the number one request that we've heard from residents who live in that neighborhood is what they want to see for that neighborhood. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Poole.
Yeah, I think we're missing the point. The ability, we accept the ability of the city to switch back and forth between various financial accounts to justify buying any piece of property or whatever they want to spend it on. I understand that. The issue is, it's not that you didn't spend CDBG money on the property that you evicted people from, as though that makes it okay. It does not. And additionally, because that's what we did. And I fully support all of the words you used about what you're intending to do and how we expect this to work for the community and so forth. But I would suggest to you that, and the commission, you telling people what they need is where the disconnect is. What Mrs. Ashburn said is, we live there, and you coming in telling us what's good for us when you're evicting people, when we see it's not good for us. All the things that I live on over where I live, listening to what you're going to do for those people who have less than me, sounds wonderful. But you see, the difference is here, some of us recognize that the people that you're doing it for, they ought to be kind of involved. And you haven't done that up to now. No, everything you said is about wait, and I hope they'll be patient, and then we'll let them know, and when we roll it out, it's going to be incredible. Maybe, and I agree, it will be better than they had before without their involvement. They accept it. You come and sell us on what you're doing is being great for us. Oftentimes it is. But there's always, like those people that, in spite of our intentions, are homeless. And when we bought that property, I said that they were being evicted when I voted no on the sale. And there was none of this, oh, well, CDBG money, I could have found her a place to live. So going forward, any property you buy, and as from what Mrs. Twine brought up, would like to hear, I'd like to see the Code Enforcement Department's reports of how destitute and terrible the place was before you threw the people out of it. And then number two, I'll question whether you're using, I'll pay attention now, whether you're using CDBG money to get a property that somebody's going to be thrown out of, or we're using some other money. And I think you can't throw them out either way to get a vote. There's no reason for us to take properties that people are paying taxes on off the rolls and throw people out of their houses that may have to leave out of town so we don't even get their income tax anymore, when we don't have to have the property today. You don't even have a study yet. So there's no reason for us to buy the property today, any property that somebody's living in. So sorry to preach, but that's where I'm at, folks. Going forward, I just can't believe folks sit here and do that, throw people out of their homes or property that we're just going to turn into grass for the next year and a half. Seriously?
Mr. Chairman.
Let's go home.
Commissioner Murray.
I didn't hear the city manager to say that we'd actually evicted anyone. What I understood the city manager to indicate was that when we use CDBG funds, we are required to go through the process, and we do adhere to the law, finding other folks for homes, and that when we have otherwise purchased property, the properties have been vacant. So
I'm going to verify that for you, because the last properties we bought before, those folks had, and that's who she's talking about.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
Jenny,
what
Jenny, just provide proof next time. We'll get the proof and bring it to next meeting. Because you can't.
Ms. Ashburn, please.
I'm sorry.
Just a minute. Mr. Poole, you done?
Yep, there are people living in the house. I want to look before we voted.
The word on the street is that the guy who bought the house, Josh sold it to the city. But he sold it to the city on the contingency that the people would be out of it. And he would get paid when those people were gone. So that the city didn't do it, but Josh did it. That's how, so you can say we wouldn't do that, but you made that a contingency for him to get paid. So that is you doing it, and you flowering over this and saying how wonderful you are and that we only have the best for you involved, and we just want you to have a splash pad. It's so insulting, you know.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Twine.
I'd ask that everyone just kind of calm down a little bit, because there are a lot of assumptions being made. There's hearsay being repeated. Mr. Woopser did state that he would get in touch with you, Ms. Ashburn, to discuss what was going on. And I think we need to, again, just not let our imaginations and emotions run away, because I think I'm hearing a lot of hearsay. So again, I just would like for all of us to just, you made a very, very, very important point tonight, and it is well taken, and we are going to follow up. So I just want that message to get across, is that we are not trying to paper over anything. We're not trying to make excuses, but we are trying to respond, and we are trying to respond truthfully and appropriately.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner.
I just want to make some last comments and sort of echo what Commissioner Twine had mentioned. But just in my personal experience with this whole matter, since that of the master plan was first introduced, our city manager, Eric Woopser, as well as our staff, had certainly stressed the importance of getting, particular stakeholders from that particular area involved in future conversations. One individual in particular who we actually reached out was Pastor Curtis Johnson. However, we tried to set up a meeting, with him, but he had a family vacation, and we have since not been able to reestablish a date and time for that meeting. But that being said, I think many of us in this room understand that the potential redevelopment of that area is a very delicate one, and one that we all must handle with kid gloves, for a lack of a better term. And so, I have my full, and I guess I'm trying to say I have the utmost confidence in our city and our staff that we will be mindful of the concerns of those citizens and those investors and stakeholders within that area, and while also trying to, again, create something that will be sustainable, going forward. So again, as Commissioner Twine, had sort of mentioned, although it can be very difficult, the city's intention is not to leave anyone in the dark, but perhaps we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and be too premature when we necessarily don't have a definitive plan in place, or at least, at the very least, something concrete to present to you to then get your feedback. So then that way we can then begin to make changes as we move forward to hopefully create a comprehensive plan that is beneficial to everyone. So again, my hope is that we can just continue to be patient just a little bit longer so that we can make sure we get this right. So thank you.
Any additional comments from residents on city business? Not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Second.
We are adjourned.
Second.